There was a big confrontation between the ANC and DA ministers in the cabinet meeting which occurred last week. On Friday, there was an extended cabinet meeting about the medium-term development plan. And apparently all of the challenges that the GNU is facing all came to the front in the nature of the confrontations that came up. So if you don't know what it is, the medium-term development plan is the plan that is meant to translate the GNU priorities into a detailed 5-year plan, which will spell out the interventions which the government will make over its term of office. It's the strategic direction of the country for the next 5 years, and it's a very important document because every minister, every bureaucrat, every administrator is going to be looking at that document to try to say, okay, what are my priorities? What are my department's goals? What are we working on? What are we not working on? And how do we measure success? So the document is pretty significant. And basically, it's the GNU's version of what the ANC government was doing before, which was the medium-term strategic framework. Whenever you're planning, you've got short-term, which can be between 1 to 3 years, and then you've got medium-term, which is between 3 to 5 years, and then you've got long-term, which is 5 years, 10 years longer, right? So you need to plan. Planning is critical so that the way the ANC has done it, and many countries really do this 5-year planning thing, and it also tracks back to when Russia was doing 5-year plans. China then started doing 5-year plans as well. So you see a lot of 5-year plans. It's also the length of an administration, but 5-year planning is something that is a feature of many administrations around the world. So this medium-term development plan was supposed to be this plan. And it's still not done, which is an issue we're going to talk about later. So this was supposed to be the version of the GNU version of what the ANC has been doing in its medium-term strategic frameworks, okay? So the plan, according to reporting from Sunday Times, was announced by Maropini Ramokgopa, who is the minister responsible for planning, monitoring, and evaluation. She presented the plan to the extended cabinet meeting, which was also attended by deputy ministers, provincial premiers, director generals, and other top government officials. So this is supposed to be the elite team, the A team, you know, the Springboks who are going to win the world championship of the economy and bring jobs, stop crime, all of these things, bring tourists, etc. So everyone who matters to the administration of the country was in that meeting, which created a lot of potential for leaks, a lot of potential for this to actually make it to the front pages of the Sunday papers, which it did, right? So the big areas of clash. Apparently, Alan Winde led the arguments, but he was supported by all of the DA ministers who were in the GNU. The big area of clash, apparently, which caused all kinds of drama, was the issue of the NHI, this National Health Insurance, which is supposed to be universal healthcare coverage, which copies basically the NHS, which is the system which exists in the United Kingdom, which also is facing some significant challenges, but those challenges arise for a different set of reasons. But NHS works, but it's not in good shape right now, and doctors are leaving the NHS, going to Europe, going to Canada, going to America, going to Australia. Lots of challenges there as well. But African doctors are closing the gaps because they go there and they cover the gaps for the UK doctors who are leaving. Anyway, what exactly about the NHI led to these disputes? The biggest area of contention is that in this plan, the strategic plan, there's a discussion around medical aid being scrapped by 2029. So before the next election, effectively, there will no longer be medical aid. And when this was challenged by the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde, apparently Aaron Motsoaledi lost it. This is according to the reports. He was shouting at them, then they were shouting at each other. It was just a war of words, according to the reporting. And what the leak then said to Sunday Times is that Aaron Motsoaledi was called to order Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi by his colleagues, and he was told to cool down, etc., etc. It became about class because he and others were arguing that no, the DA is trying to serve particular class interests, while the ANC is trying to make sure that everyone has access to healthcare. Obviously, the DA would be saying, you guys don't know how to run a healthcare system, but also at the same time, this is a way for you to steal funds from this, from the private sector, and specifically from the big medical aids, because you must remember that medical aid is a fund, right? So Discovery manages a fund. It's a pool of money that people pay into, then they disperse those payments to the hospitals, to the doctors, etc., and they buy certain things. So it's a fund. So the narrative that is coming out of the private sector is that, hey, you guys want to loot this fund, and this money is going to end up having situations like what we saw with the healthcare scandals which happened in Gauteng, particularly where genes were being bought, quote unquote, but really what was happening is money was looted, invoices were then created, fabricated, and then all of a sudden people say, no, we use the money to buy genes, etc., etc. You remember that's what Babita Decoran was killed for, because she exposed the corruption that was happening in the Department of Health, and then she was gone. So there are real concerns that are being raised about the end of medical aid. Then there are other concerns just around, should they be a private sector in healthcare, etc. There's a bit of also just pointing this out, there's a contradiction within the Ramaphosa administration. That contradiction is as follows. On one side, they want to privatize electricity. People like Patrice Motsepe and Johan Rupert benefit from that because they have found ways to be part of the IPP infrastructure. Patrice Motsepe is part of this consortium, which is known as ICAMVA Consortium, which has won a majority of the IPP tenders. And they've been now getting funding to build these independent power stations, etc. It's very expensive. Most of it is funded by these loans from Europe and also local loans, but they take very little risk. They get all of the benefits because they've got a guaranteed customer in Eskom. Rupert himself has found a way to fit into this equation because he has the Southern African Energy Exchange. So all these IPPs make electricity, put it on the grid, but Rupert sells it to different distributors, similar to what he does in the Vumatel model. Because if you didn't know, Remgro owns the Dark Fiber Africa, which puts the fibers in, and Vumatel, which puts the internet into your home. And then if you've tried to use Vumatel or you use Vumatel, you know that you can also access other service providers. They pay to get access to Vumatel, and then they sell to you. So that's basically the same model that he wants to use for electricity. So on the one side, privatization of electricity. On the other side, nationalization of healthcare, which is a contradiction if you think about it, because do you believe in the role of the state as the provider of public goods? If you think that the state should be the sole provider of public goods such as healthcare, how do you simultaneously believe that the private sector should be the provider of electricity, which is a public good, which tends to natural monopoly? It's a fair question to ask. So there's a contradiction in this cabinet, right? So the dispute is actually around the removal altogether of medical aid, because it means that the whole fund, the money in that fund, then will be taken over by the state and administered by the state, right? It's a nationalization, basically. So this apparently led to all manner of shouting, all manner of confrontations, and then there were other disputes. One of the other disputes that was a key clash is that the DA and the ANC clashed over control of the country's harbors and the Department of Trade and Industry localization policy. So right now, the country's ports are run by Transnet, right? But the DA prefers private partners to take over the Cape Town harbor, for instance. They want that to be run by the private sector. And they don't want localization at all. This is the DA. They say that localization makes goods more expensive for locals. Right now, goods are very expensive because of extreme concentration of the markets in a few hands. Prices don't go down even when fuel goes down, etc. So there are real criticisms to the DA's argument in and of itself, but that is the issue. And you must recall, this is not the first time that the DA and the ANC have clashed over key legislation. The big issue that came up earlier was the issue of the Bella Bill, at the time now the Bella Act, And what the president then did was just like, listen, I'm going to slow down 4 and 5, give you guys 3 months to convince me. It's not clear whether or not he has been convinced or whether or not they are going to be resolutions. The way that this meeting ended, the one on Friday, this extended cabinet meeting, which was supposed to resolve on the issues of the medium-term development plan, is that the president and deputy president then proposed that the documents be sent back to the cabinet clusters and that other issues of contention be referred to the clearinghouse, which is supposed to be this dispute resolution mechanism. Whether or not the issues will be resolved is a question for another day. Now, the finance minister, Enoch Godongwana, then gave information to the media that even though this referral has happened to say, send it back to the clusters, send stuff to the clearinghouse, he would announce the medium-term budget statement regardless, which is at the end of October. So that's still going on unaffected, right? You need to be very aware as well that Business Unity South Africa is very opposed to the NHI, right? Adrian Goh, who's the CEO of Discovery, and you know that Discovery is the largest medical aid in South Africa, and I think in Southern Africa really, and has large amounts of funds in its pockets. He's opposed to this. Business Unity South Africa just made a CEO pledge, 140 CEOs pledged 250 million to the president and to his project management in particular. So they are not a side complainer. They are a complainer who are part of this president's project management thing, working with the president, and they claim that they are the ones who ended load shedding, etc. Although there's a dispute about whether or not it was them or just simply making sure that certain bad actions which were being taken were stopped, such as trying to pretend as if coal is not the backbone of the South African energy system. So when this all now comes into a point of reflection, here are some thoughts that I have about this particular situation as things stand right now. Number one, leaks. The leaks are everywhere. Leaks are, in my opinion, as a member of the public, are good because they're helping the public see what the divisions and the fractures are between the DA and the ANC. They're helping the public see what are the issues being discussed, how are they being discussed, how are they being resolved. Cabinet needs to be something that is not confidential to the public. The public needs to know what are ministers saying, what is the quality of ministers, what are the quality of the presentations made by ministers. Many members of the public have concerns about some ministers. They see some ministers, they're like, this minister is not make sure. This minister, and you know there's some ministers where you're like, no man, this appointee should not actually be in this position. And there's some who've been mentioned. You know, Mail and Guardian used to do this thing, and I think they still do it, where they rate ministers and give them a grade. Many ministers were getting D, E, D, E. Those are not passing grades, you know, if you're thinking about a high-quality pass. You know, it's, in some contexts, I guess you could say a D and a E are passes, but they're not really. They're not really, right? A C or better is really what you want in life. So if you're getting a D, an E, so they are, you can go look. And so I think the anonymity or the confidential nature of cabinet meetings is something that we actually have to ask ourselves, why? Why is it confidential? The public should know. The public should have a line of sight because ministers are exercising that power with the consent of the public. Those who govern do so with the consent of the governed. They give them that power. It's rented power, right? And you have to renew through the vote, right? So now if the landlords of the power cannot see what the tenants are doing at periodic periods, it can lead to problems, right? Because they only get to find out that the house has been trashed after 5 years. So I think that the leaks have value, and I think that the leaks actually are useful, right? But the leaks also tell us something. Whenever you have leaks from meetings which are supposed to be confidential, which I don't think they should be confidential, by the way, so I'm making that clear. Whenever you see leaks, however, these leaks show weakness of the unity in the so-called government of national unity. Whenever meetings of this nature are meant to be private and they leak, it's very clear that there's no real goodwill on both sides of that meeting. And there are people in that meeting saying, I'm going to tell the people. I'm telling everybody everything, right? Meaning that they don't buy in. They don't buy into the model. They don't buy into the meeting. They don't buy into any of that stuff. And I would be worried as the leader of a meeting where I know we're supposed to be having a confidential meeting, but as soon as people step out of this meeting, it's just going to be a bloodbath. Everyone is calling, hello Sunday Times, hello Sowetan, hello City Press, hello Adrian Person, hello T.D. Matia, hello Clement Manyatela. You don't have a meeting. It's at that point, you might as well just do it in public. Let the public see for themselves, because that is going to be something that is going to continue to happen. It's very early, and already we're seeing all of these leaks. I'm not seeing this thing being a solid union, and I'm not seeing the unity in the government of national unity. It's united against MK and EFF, but it's not united on a vision, which is a problem. And that takes me to my third point. When the opening of parliament address, this kind of like halftime sauna, because you have a sauna at the beginning of the year, then after the election there's another speech, which is typically called a sauna, but this year they didn't call it a sauna, they called it an opening of parliament address. When the speech was given in July, one of the concerns that I raised was that there was no grand plan articulated at that time. So a deal was signed on a statement of intent and not necessarily on concrete strategic planning, which shows that there's an issue, right? When you can't just sign a whole deal, it's on intention. What are the specifics? Anyway, that's what happened, right? We got to that particular point. That's what happened. Before the speech, we were told that there's going to be this first cabinet meeting, and when the opening of parliament speech is given, there's going to be a combined plan that is presented. Then the speech happened. There was no plan that was presented. Now it's over 100 days into the GNU. These ministers have been celebrating Bogaten. GNU is amazing. GNU, walala, walala, wololo, senzamat. Come on, guys. Over 100 days, and there's no medium-term plan or consensus on the plan. That, to me, is not a reflection of good leadership on the side of both entities who are supposed to be the leaders of this so-called amazing kumbaya government of national unity. It's not good leadership. Failure to plan is planning to fail, right? Or there's actually a recognition on one side that I know we're not going to come up with the plan. We must just go ahead with our plan. Right? And maybe that's what the ANC really is trying to do here. But I think it must be pointed out, and it must be underlined, that all of the people who are celebrating the GNU missed critical elements. This is what the president said, if you remember. He said, when he gave the opening of parliament address, he said, through a statement of intent, the parties have agreed on a minimum program as the foundation of the work of the government of national unity. That minimum program was supposed to lead to priority actions. The priority actions that arise from this minimum program received the full support of the recent Cabinet Lekgotla. That's what he said. Then he said, Cabinet will be convening a further strategy session to consider the medium-term development plan, which will translate these priorities into a detailed plan and interventions that the government will implement over the next 5 years. This is what he said, the medium-term development plan will set out a well-defined vision and strategic plan that outlines quite a number of things. I'm kidding, he didn't say that. That outlines clear goals and includes specific measurable objectives and a roadmap for achieving them. These goals will be properly aligned with the budget, which will support the implementation of these objectives. That's what he said. Now, there's still no plan. It's, a long walk to plan. Not long walk to freedom, long walk to a development plan. Medium-term plan. It's Nelson Mandela out here. We're not seeing any plan. It's still coming. After you climb one hill of planning, you realize there's still more planning left. And then you get to that plan. That's what Mandela said, right, in the book. Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. There's no plan. And that is something that worries me. Then I go to the fourth point that I have here, because what the president said is that the goals of the medium-term plan will be aligned with the budget, which will support the implementation of these objectives. So if that's what's supposed to happen, how are you now proceeding with the medium-term budget statement? Right? Because that makes me think the ANC is going ahead with its own plan. The budget is the funding model for the medium-term plan. Whenever the budgets and on budget statements, whether it's midterm or just the budget in and of itself, and the midterm tells you the direction that the minister is going, that is lined up with this year, the next year, the next year. It's like a 3-year funding iteration that he gives you. So now this coalition, which is supposed to be a coalition between various entities, cannot just continue with the old financial plan of the ANC government. So if now a medium-term budget is being announced, what plan is it based on? How are the goals being aligned with the budget? What's happening in that instance? This could mean that the DA effectively is just being, what is it? They are being sidelined. It's a switch and bait, right? Because they think that there's still going to be opportunity to fix these things, to address these things. But if the budget is going ahead, is there really going to be an opportunity? Is there really? So that part of it, I think that there would have been nothing wrong if the actual cabinet had said, we can't resolve these things. We're pushing back the medium-term budget statement by 2 weeks so that we can come up with full resolution on issues of the medium term. Then the midterm budget statement and the budget, which is coming later, will be in alignment with this. Because let's say you agree in Jan, is there really a belief that in Jan the budget will then be changed? The budget, right? The Minister of Finance is making funding allocations, doing so with the full direction of the president and his planning team. So if the GNU cabinet is not agreeing on the plan, what plan is the budget being allocated on? It must therefore be the old ANC plan. They are moving ahead with their own plan, de facto, right? So that's my fourth point. Fifth point I want to make is the president is buying time, right, by deferring things. Okay, I'm going to give 3 months for this. I'm going to do 3 months for that, whatever. But how long would this strategy work, right? If they don't change the sections in the Bella Act, which the DA was complaining about, is that strike one? Then now, if they keep pushing through with ending medical aid by 2029, that could be strike two. What could be strike three? That effectively could mean going to the next election, they are going to face fierce resistance. And this could actually mean that the ANC will drop to 30% because the national health insurance is not popular. Here, you go to Cape Town here, where everyone is on medical aid, here in the affluent areas of Cape Town. Nobody wants that, right? People have older relatives who are on medical aid, who have cancer, who have all of these things, and they are afraid of public health care. They really are. They are afraid of dying. Many people are in the middle class. They are afraid of going to the public hospitals, right? Some of that fear is unjustified. I've had relatives go to public hospitals. You know, I think I went to a public hospital once myself. So the point that I'm trying to make is it is bad in the public hospitals. I don't want to lie. It's not good. Like sometimes things that could have been avoidable, they happen. Deaths that are avoidable happen because the system is overwhelmed, right? And it's badly managed. I think the one time I visited a friend at the Tambo Memorial Hospital, oh my word. Everything was broken. You couldn't even go to the loo. And she had been in a car accident, right? They were coming from a celebration. She was in a car accident. She used to go to CAF, this church at Wits, and I visited her every day at the Tambo Memorial Hospital. So her ribs were fractured, her hip was broken, fractured, and she was also, her leg and her arm were broken. So she was in a really bad state, and I'd go there every day to talk to her, keep her company. And Tambo Memorial, no. Like, the stuff that needed to work did work, but the hospital was in bad shape. I don't want to lie. The hospital was in bad shape. And when you go to these public hospitals and you see some of the stuff there, you're like, no. This government is failing in terms of delivering. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, she got out, she was healed, but it was a very difficult time. It was a very difficult time. So this thing is not popular, NHI, with key constituents. And many people are still critical right now of the existing healthcare system. And there have been so many corruption scandals, life is demanding, the stuff that happened in Gauteng. People are like, why don't you just fix the things that are currently broken before you go for this very ambitious level? Clean the house first before you can say we should trust you with the whole fund that currently exists in the private sector. So the president is buying time, but you can only buy time for so long. What happens after 2027 when there's now new leadership in the ANC? And this is still an act. It's an act now, NHI. It's an act of it's the law of the land. So this NHI thing could really be the undoing of the ANC in the next election, because there won't be any Ramaphoria, he won't be there. But at the same time, as it's getting closer to that deadline, the fears will start kicking in. Some of them rational, some of them irrational. Anyway, my final thought that I want to give you is that even though there was all of this fighting about the midterm strategic plan, there has to be a conversation about the planning of the ANC government in general. You know, from the NDP up until now, you read the plans. The plans are beautiful wish lists, but execution, accountability, consequence management, non-existent. You go read the NDP and see the things that they said we're going to get by 2030. You were very far from everything. So there's also a conversation that needs to be had about better planning, smart planning, but also consequence management for the failure of those smart plans. The ministers were supposed to sign performance contracts, all of this stuff. I don't even know even if GNU guys are going to sign ministers. Maybe that's why John is hiring people from YouTube. You know, John Steenhuisen is just hiring people from YouTube. He knows that as a minister, nobody's going to check. I might as well get my favorite YouTubers. John, hey, do you need someone there? I'm also on YouTube. Anyway, guys, out of time. Till the next one.